Welcome into another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where today we'll really dive a little bit deeper into the transfer portal. Going to do more of an overarching episode today, covering some of the bigger moves of the offseason. As you've seen, we've posted about some of the guys in mid majors, low majors transferring up to some power conference schools. Today we're going to talk about some of those big name schools that have had a quietly good offseason, or some of the ones that have been pretty loud and made a lot of noise here in the portal. But really, the goal of today's episode is to just talk about the portal. We haven't done that yet. We talked about the coaching carousel, but we're just going to dive right in, talk about all the moves that have been made. Of course, as Cody alluded to in our previous episode, over 2,000 guys in the portal or whatever it is. So a lot of movement out there, a lot of names that entered the portal that, were pretty surprising. Guys, of course, just chasing that NIL bag, but, a crazy portal season with still more guys to come, and some guys we'll discuss a little bit as well in this episode that entered the NBA draft but maintained college eligibility. They have another month before I think it's June 15th, they can withdraw from the draft still. So you have some guys out there still that, I fully expect them to end up back in college, but, you just never know. Some guys make very poor decisions, like Kobe Simmons at Arizona once upon a time when he was told not to go to the draft and then he went undrafted anyway. And just guys don't listen sometimes, but a lot of exciting movement this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with Kobe Simmons playing in the era that he did, I think it would have been a pretty easy decision now, like just going back to school and making a couple mil at wherever he was going to go next. But yeah, there were some guys that guys like RJ Lewis, I guess, is like, I don't think his stock could really be all that much higher at this point. Like he's probably projected somewhere in the second round at this point. He's coming off the best year of his college career. So I think he's kind of a 50-50 guy. I've heard some good things about Darian Williams in the draft process, potentially like some second round buzz, maybe even back end of the first. So who knows what he's going to do? I mean, he's got a lot of teams waiting for it to give him $3.5 to $4 million as well. So there are a bunch of guys, and there's still over half of the transfer portal is still available out there right now. I have the exact number. It's 2,518 total transfers, and 1,100 guys have committed so far. So there's still another 1,400 guys across all of college basketball right now.
And what you're going to see too, just like we see every year, is like a lot of those guys won't even find a home. Like there are a lot of guys that won't even be playing college basketball next year. They'll be at a JUCO somewhere, or they'll just never play college basketball again. That's just kind of the nature of what happens every year, right? You get a bunch of guys coming in as freshmen or coming in from JUCO. You get guys in the portal. Like there's not enough roster spots for all 2,500 guys to go somewhere at the same level. You're going to see guys go D2, maybe some even go D3, as we see every year. But there's certainly not 2,518 spots on Division I rosters for all these guys.
Right. And I think a lot of those entries are for guys that are hoping to get that extra year of eligibility and hoping to get a waiver or whatever's going on there to potentially for everyone to pick up a fifth year, and some of the JUCO transfer stuff. I know some JUCO guys are getting waivers, but for guys just seeking that fifth year of eligibility, there's a lot of guys that entered the portal just because their agents kind of told them to do that. And I don't anticipate any of those guys getting waivers. So there's probably a lot less guys in the portal than the actual raw number of 2,500. But nonetheless, there's still a lot of action to be had. Maybe not as much at the power conference level. I think a lot of teams have their rosters mostly rounded in the form. It's a lot of guys that are looking to transfer down or from mid-major to mid-major.
Yeah. One of those guys as you were talking about seeking that fifth year, Ian Shefflin, funny enough, like we're number 18 for Clemson football. We'll see really what transpires there. Is that just kind of a a way to keep him in college in case that 5th year does get passed. I don't really foresee him really playing football for Clemson, but I could be wrong. If anyone was going to do it, I guess it would probably be him. But remains to be seen what ends up happening with that waiver.
Yeah, I mean, I've told a couple of guys, like, if there was a list of 5 players in college basketball that I could see going on to play college football after their 4-year career, Ian Shefflin would be one of the 5 guys on that list. I don't know who the other guys are. I mean, Caleb Lohner during his time, I think would have been another guy I would have thrown. Yeah, he did. I think he went in the 7th round. I mean,
Yeah,
pretty crazy. He had his share of destinations. He was at BYU, Utah, and Baylor, and then ends up playing football I think he played football at Utah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And hopefully, maybe Shefflin will play and have some success. Who knows? I mean, what a 6'8", 265-pound tight end could work out, but I guess that remains to be seen.
Right. Yeah. So, a lot of surprising moves here in the portal, as I had mentioned. First one I'm going to dive into, this was probably the most surprising move for me anyway for this offseason. And, I think it came from Baylor to BYU. To me, that was Rob Wright. Baylor was fully anticipating this guy being back, right? Like, if for anyone that's read anything about that whole situation, like, Rob Wright was fully expected back at Baylor. They were going to pay him a bunch of money. And then word got out that, hey, BYU might be willing to throw you more. And then he enters the portal and, was kind of a big slap in the face to Coach Drew and Baylor. And, a few days later commits to BYU for whatever, $4.5 million or whatever he got. And, now Kevin Young's really built somewhat of a juggernaut for this upcoming season at BYU if all the pieces fall into place. But, Rob Wright, Richie Saunders, obviously AJ Dubbanza, and everyone else that is still sticking around there, they're going to be legit.
Yeah, definitely too bad for Baylor that he ended up walking out the door. But, I mean, it just seems like BYU can buy any player that they want in the entire country. It just seems like they have an infinite amount of money. I mean, basically at least to the basketball program. I don't know about the football program all that much, but I think Rob Wright was kind of the missing piece, or will be the missing piece to the puzzle, and a guy that they didn't really have last year that could get into the lane consistently and create advantages and be able to kick out the shooters. I know they had a gifted passer in Yegor Demon, but he wasn't really much of an advantage creator on the ball, wasn't really great in isolation. He was a good pick and roll creator, but Rob Wright's explosiveness, ability to get into the lane and make decisions once he gets in the lane is going to open up everyone else's game. Like you said, like Saunders is back. Dubbanza is obviously going to be another guy that can create his own look and create for others. And then obviously shooters on the wing and Dawson Baker. And then they brought in Kennard Davis from Southern Illinois, who's a pretty underrated get. He's going to play a pretty big role, I think, off the bench. He was a 38% 3-point shooter, but for Rob Wright to be able to run this offense, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's averaging close to 6.5 assists, maybe 6. I think he's going to have more of a role in this offense than he even had at Baylor last season. So this is one of my favorite gets in the entire portal. This is probably the first guy I was going to bring up as well. So we're definitely aligned there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very surprising. BYU kind of became somewhat of a fan favorite as the season wore on, just because of the style of basketball they play. Fun, up-tempo style, just seemingly always making the right plays. So it'll be really fun to watch Rob Wright now, like, orchestrating that offense alongside Dubbanza and Richie Saunders, who of course broke out this year. But another team, that had a big off season, and to many, like, on the surface, kind of a peculiar off season just by who they brought in, is Michigan, right? And they probably got the number one player in the portal, and they also got your guy Cody Adai-Mara, but Yaxel Lendeborg from UAB, They also brought in a Daimara, right? So 2 bigs there, plus Morez Johnson coming over from Illinois. So basically 3 big men plus Elliot Cadeau. Obviously, they see Vlad Golden go out the door. Danny Wolf entering the draft, which I'm a little bit unsure of, whether he should have stayed another year or not. He could have made a bag in college, I would think. And then they saw Trey Donaldson go down to Miami. So bringing in Cadeau to replace him. But, Michigan, obviously Dusty May has a type of player he's going after. And, he's been very aggressive for bigs in the portal the last 2 seasons in his first 2 years at Michigan.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of remains to be seen whether Lendeborg is going to stay in the draft or go back to Michigan. I would assume he ends up back at Michigan with the amount of money he got. I think, what did he end up getting? 2.5 to 3, or in that area. I think it might be smart for him to. I think it's honestly could be smart for him to go to the draft. I think he's that talented. He can do everything that Danny Wolf did last year and even more. They're very similar play types, but I do think Lendeborg is not far more talented, but he's definitely more talented. I think there's a little bit of a gap there. He did everything for that UAB offense last year, and he sort of dominated the American Conference. And yeah, I mean, this front court in general is it's pretty ridiculous. Morez Johnson and Adai Mara are going to be playing kind of similar roles to what they played last year at UCLA and Illinois, respectively. But I think this kind of 3-headed monster in the front court is going to be pretty unstoppable. I guess they could have added a little more shooting. I don't really trust. Obviously, Cadeau is not really a shooter. He creates more value with the ball in his hands. So that's going to be something that Lendeborg and Cadeau kind of need to work out. But I would have liked for them to add another shooter on the wing to kind of replace like Roddy Gale or Namari Burnett's production. They were definitely an up and down year. They weren't. I mean, Burnett, he shot at 40%. Gale, obviously not the greatest of shooters. He shot at 23% and had a stretch of success, especially in the tournament, that big game against Texas A&M. But I would have liked for them to add another shooter. I guess it kind of remains to be seen what Trey McKinney is, the 4-star freshman. And they're not really done in the portal yet. But this collection of players they're going to have to work some things out. But obviously, there's a lot of talent here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I trust Dusty May, I think, to figure it out. They do probably need some shooting, right? I mean, I'm not an Elliot Cadeau guy anyway, but maybe this change of scenery helps him out a little bit. Maybe Dusty May has some sort of like shooting whisperer that he can get Elliot right. But, I think Dusty May's proven at everywhere that he's been now that he can get his teams playing good basketball. So I have no reason to believe that he won't be able to. He doesn't have a plan. I figure he has a plan here with this team, and he's going to get them playing good basketball by the time the season rolls around. Another team that had a big off season. They saw one guy go home for them. Back to New York. Ian Jackson, St. John's, Rick Pitino, obviously coming off their best season in a long, long time at St. John's, has made bunch of splashes here in the portal this season, but losing RJ Lewis, depending on what he ends up doing, staying in the draft or going elsewhere, but he's reloaded with a bunch of guys: Ian Jackson, Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, who's dealt with some injuries, of course, at Providence, but still a really good player when healthy. If he can stay healthy, big get for them. Sannon from Arizona State, Josiah Sellers from Stanford. They've had a pretty loud offseason, and they've spent some money too.
For sure. And yeah, they're one of the only programs with a $20 million budget or a $20 million roster. It's pretty ridiculous. I didn't think St. John's would be one of those schools, but I mean, Pitino, there's been a clear emphasis in one area, and that's in the shooting department, picking up guys like Sellers and Sannon and even Ian Jackson, who shot it pretty well, not on super high volume, but he had a great freshman year. And it looks like Ian Jackson is going to be the point guard on this team, which I guess that kind of remains to be seen what that's going to look like. But their more up-tempo style should allow for them to not have too much fall back onto the point guard role. But yeah, I mean, obviously they have super talented roster. I think Dylan Mitchell is a pretty good fit on this roster as well. It's a lankier, wing or 3-4 man on the wing to defend for Rick Pitino, and like he's kind of like an RJ Lewis archetype. Obviously, not the same type of offensive player, but he definitely fits the mold on this roster. And then getting Zuby Ejiofor back as well. I feel like where everyone's talking about all the transfers, I mean, talking about the guys that you get back, I think is extremely important as well. And Ejiofor was one of the best offensive rebounders in the entire country last year, so definitely good to have him back. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a different look for the St. John's team. They're going to have a little bit more offense at the expense of maybe not having like the greatest group of wing defenders. Sellers and Sandin aren't really the greatest of defenders, and the St. John's team was loaded on the wing defensively, led by Lewis and like Aaron Scott and Kadari Richmond, and they don't really have that kind of defensive punch, but I think it's going to give them a little bit of a higher ceiling come tournament time.
Yeah, and for Ian Jackson, he probably had the best game of his freshman season at UNC in Madison Square Garden. We were actually at that game, right? He had like 24 in that game. Big comeback win over UCLA. So
that was his breakout game, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, not only is he going home, back to where he's from, but he's going to be playing in an arena every night when they're at home that he's shown he can play well in. So maybe there's some levels of comfort there for him that can really turn the page for him and bring some more consistency, as we saw him struggle down the stretch for North Carolina this season. One other team I wanted to bring up off the jump here is Louisville. They had a big offseason bringing in mainly guards, right? I mean, they brought in Conwell, Isaac McNeely, getting him to come over from Virginia, and then Adrian Woolley coming over from Kennesaw State. Louisville really trying to put themselves in a position to hang with the top dogs in the ACC. Obviously, this year they finished third in the ACC, and they were right there. But this has been a loud offseason for Pat Kelsey at Louisville.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of great guys for his system that, they like to get up and down. They like to shoot the three at a high clip. And he probably has or got two of the best movement shooters in the entire country, and Ryan Conwell and Isaac McNeely. They're very versatile as shooters. Like McNeely can play in the spot up game. He can get run off screens consistently. He's not much of an on ball creator, but his spacing presence being on the floor is going to open up a lot for guys like Woolley, who's probably going to come off the bench. If I had to guess, Michael Brown, the 5-star freshman, he's going to have a lot on his plate, I guess, in the creation department, try to create for these shooters. But I think Conwell can really help out in that area as well. So yeah, this is probably going to be one of the better shooting teams in the entire country. The front court, they maintained a lot of their front court. They got Kason Pryor back from his torn ACL, and obviously Javon Hadley is going to be coming back as well. So yeah, this roster at the moment shapes up pretty well. Maybe if they add another front court depth piece, I think that would be big. They lost James Scott to the portal. He hasn't gone anywhere yet, but he was a really versatile defender that really helped out this defense all year long, especially when Pryor was hurt after the first 7 games of the year. So maybe defense is a slight concern at this point in time, but they're definitely going to be one of the best shooting teams in the country.
Yeah. Now, one team I know, Cody, you love, and we talked about them already in our previous episode a little bit, but your boys over at Iowa, Bennett Sturts and the gang, obviously Ben McCollum had a pretty good offseason here, as we've touched on so far, looking like, he's trying to get Iowa to play a much different brand of basketball, which I think was much needed there.
Yeah, you're not going to get the Fran McCaffrey style of basketball. Actually, you're probably going to get the exact opposite. You're going to get a super slow pace and a defense-oriented team. And I think he brought over a lot of those guys from Drake, the defensive back. But like Bennett Sturts, he's a great defender as well, as really taking on all of the offensive load for that Drake team last year. And then obviously he has other guys in the front court like Cam Manyow, Isaiah Howard, and Tavion Banks, who they can absolutely play up to the Big Ten level. They are extremely physical defenders, so I think they're going to be fine in that area. And Ben McCollum with extra talent on his roster is something that I think every team in the country should be like extremely scared about. I mean, bringing in Alvaro Folgaris from Robert Morris, the Horizon Player of the Year, he's a very versatile game. I have his transfer analysis up on the website if you want to check that out. I forget what I gave him for a grade. I believe I gave him a B plus. He's versatile foreman that can shoot it. You can kind of run some offense through him, and he can take the pressure off of Bennett Sturts at times. That's something that Sturts didn't really have the luxury of last season at Drake. He played like all but like 40 minutes last season. He was on the floor pretty much the entire season. And then you bring in the Mitch Muscari replacement in Brendan Hawson, who is a more talented shooter than Mitch Muscari. He's one of the best movement shooters in the entire country as well. Pretty much has unlimited range. He can make shots from 25 to 27 feet pretty consistently. So now that Bennett Sturts doesn't have all of the pressure on him to create everything, I think it's going to open up his game as well. And even last season, I mean, he averaged 19, 6 assists on 50% shooting from the floor and 40% from three. So with his game getting opened up, the ceiling just gets all that much higher. So I'm super high on what Ben McCollum did, and this team with talent can absolutely be one of the best teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, definitely. And like we've talked about with McCollum, he's proven he can win everywhere. So I have no doubts that if it's not this year, it won't be long before Iowa's winning. Maybe not at the national level, but winning, they're competing for Big Ten championships. It probably wouldn't be right to go through this episode without mentioning, another team that has had a loud offseason, and that's Mark Pope at Kentucky. He's really reloaded. It seems like he's poached some guys from rival schools in the conference. In Diabate from Alabama, got Denzel Aberdeen coming off the national championship to go up to Lexington. Also got Jalen Lowe from Pitt, Jaden Quaintance from Arizona State, who he tore his ACL towards the end of the season. So I'm not really sure what his status is going to look like, at least early in the season next year. I would expect he'll be out. And then, of course, they also picked up like Cam Williams from Tulane, who has some sneaky upside. He was a freshman there this past year. So Mark Pope really, retooling this roster pretty well, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a pretty clear emphasis on improving the defense. I mean, that was obviously their downfall last season, and I think they have a pretty good defense across the entire roster here at this point, at least with the top 7 or 8 guys here. Like I like Lowe, and I'll take Owe obviously as a backcourt defense, and Cam Williams, that was one of his strengths. He's more of a true 3-and-D guy, so I think he's going to fit this system pretty well. He's not going to have a ton of pressure on him to make plays with guys like Lowe and Owe creating there on the offensive end. And Moussa Diabate, a physical 4-man defensively, and obviously Jaden Quaintance is as talented as they come, especially as a rim protector. Hopefully he's healthy to start the season, but at the very least, like, he can just platoon with Brandon Garrison, who's coming back, and they can kind of split play 20 minutes apiece. And I like Aberdeen as well. It was kind of too bad that he ended up leaving Florida just to kind of chase some money there. He was going to play a pretty big role in that Florida offense. He was probably going to be the point guard, even though Xavier Lee ended up going in there from Princeton. I think Aberdeen's probably the more talented creator, I guess, when it comes to scoring inside the arc. But he's kind of projected to come off the bench right now, which is a bit odd there, but he'll end up getting his share of minutes, and he's super talented. I think he's going to end up playing a pretty big role here. But yeah, I think the emphasis on the defense, I think, is going to create a little bit of a better balance throughout this entire roster. And the shooting's not as great as it was last year, but I'm not really worried about a Mark Pope offense until I see them struggle a little bit. So yeah, Kentucky's going to be probably a top 6 or 7 team in the country to start the season, and yeah, just a super talented roster across the board.
Yeah, for sure. Now, of course, there's still a bunch of guys out there in the portal right now that don't have homes yet. One of them being PJ Haggerty, who we discussed a little bit. He's one of the top guys in the portal. He had a great season there down at Memphis, and now he's also chasing a bag. I'm sure he's looking for somewhere in that $4 million range. At least I think that's what it sounded like. So other guys in the portal that also are looking for a home, right? You've got guys like Jameer Watkins, Boogie Fland. It's still up in the air whether he's going to go to the NBA draft or not. And then we talked about RJ Lewis and Darian Williams. And then, there's just been a lot of Desmond Claude's another one we've talked about. There's been a lot of other movement between Power Fives that was a little bit surprising. We could go on and on. Cody, not sure if there's anyone you want to touch on with this.
For players still available, I think you have pretty much all of them covered. Kind of just wanted to talk about a couple teams that I think had a pretty underrated transfer portal season thus far. I think one of them is Washington. I think they did a really nice job so far in the portal, accumulating some talent. Starting with Wesley Yates coming back after a year at USC. I believe his father's on the Washington staff. I think that's kind of the reason why he went back. He also made a decent amount of money to go back to Washington. And then getting East Tennessee State transfer Kamari Peterson, who averaged 19 and a half. And I believe he was the SoCon player of the year, if not the co-player of the year. Jacob Ignacevic from Lipscomb, who averaged 20 a game in the ASUN, is really talented four-man who can space the floor. And Bryson Tucker from Indiana as well, and Lathan Somerville. So a couple of former 4 or 5 stars there. So they did a really nice job accumulating some talent. Then another team in the Big Ten that I liked was USC. You get a backcourt of Rodney Rice and Chad Baker-Mazara. I think you can kind of compete in the Big Ten this season. One other one, I actually liked what Florida State has done so far across their roster. I'm really high on Lajai Jones at the 4. A super versatile defender that kind of fits the Florida State system, with obviously Leonard Hamilton walking out the door, but Luke Locke's taken over. They kind of value the same things there. And they just have a super versatile defense across the board. Him, like Chauncey Wiggins, interconference transfer from Clemson, Kobe McGee, Rob McCray, an America East guy, and Martin Somerville at the guard spot, who's super talented. I think he's going to make a leap, and people are going to know his name by the end of the season. So pretty excited about what Florida State did, and I thought it was just a pretty underrated run through the portal for them.
Yeah, I mean, those teams all had great off seasons as well. And well, like I said, there's really not enough time for us to even come close to covering everything that you could possibly cover with the transfer portal. But like we did discuss at the top, we have this overarching episode here where we're just diving into the bigger moves, but we're gonna break this all down, right? You're gonna continue to see portal grades. You're gonna see videos for some of the big portal grade, for some of the big portal names with grades. We're gonna probably break down like the top 20 or so in video form. We're gonna do team portal reviews, just to keep you guys up to date on all the moves that have been made, because it's a lot to keep up with. You could scroll for 30 minutes just looking through the different guys that have made moves. So all over the place, as we've discussed at length.
Yeah, I'm still trying to catch up with everything myself right now. I mean, I'm trying to learn about more of these mid-major players jumping up into the power conference ranks, just because, I mean, at this point, when it comes to like predicting which teams are going to be the best, I think being able to evaluate this talent is super important. And yeah, it also it keeps diehard college basketball fans really entertained. Whether it's good or whether the transfer portal is good or bad for college basketball, it's certainly entertaining. It definitely hasn't failed in that area.
No, no, definitely not. It'd be fun if maybe they did like some sort of kind of like NBA free agency when it used to be a big deal, when it opened at like midnight and overnight you were getting all the Woj bombs and stuff. We turn that into what college basketball becomes.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting. I mean, I guess day one is pretty eventful with guys entering the portal, but it's not really the same as NBA free agency. There's no like amount of money that's being disclosed. Not that I really care about how much money a 20 or 21-year-old kid is going to make, but I
Right.
think being able to disclose all of that information would be a little bit better for the fans.
Yeah. No, I agree, but it's a lot to keep up with right now. The portal, as we've said, is going to get crazier and crazier as the years go on. I think until they put some regulations in place.
Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, some fans are pretty fed up with it already in like year 1 or 2 of the portal being kind of out of hand with the NIL stuff. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the regulations are, but until then, kind of have to just kind of get caught up with the times and just sit back and watch it all happen.
Yeah, no, and that might be something we discuss in another episode. I know one thing we want to discuss this off season and in an episode is maybe like some rule changes, some things we'd like to see across the college game. So I'm sure that will be something that will come up uh, in terms of how they might be able to regulate it, kind of a plan for leveling the playing field, even though it will never be level, right? We're just gonna it would always continue to just go through the same cycle of, okay, they put regulations in to level it, but then paying extra goes on underneath the table like it always used to, right? And then, it just is this vicious cycle. So it's an unfixable thing, I think, but they need to do something to at least fix it to a point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going to be college basketball is going to be top heavy probably for the rest of time at this point. I'm not going to say mid majors are dead because I think there's some really good mid major coaches that can elevate those programs, but obviously they're going to be a little bit more starving for talent. And I
Right.
mean, those guys they're going to have to go to the D2 route, the JUCO route to really find that talent. And they're going to have to be much better talent evaluators than a power conference coach that can just throw 4 million at a guy that averaged 22 points a game at a mid-major, and they can kind of just reap the benefits there.
Yeah, they're gonna have to be much better at like projecting talent as well, right? From high school ranks, right? Can they get guys to come in and be contributors right away and maybe contribute to a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 run, and then they're gonna enter the portal and go get 4 million from pick a school, and that's going to be the end of that, right? So, but if for those coaches at the mid major level that are able to do that, right, that's probably where you're going to see those coaches get brought to higher levels of coaching, right? That's going to be kind of the next step in not that it wasn't before, but I think it's going to be even more important now than ever.
Yeah, I mean the coaches are getting poached just as much as the players at this point. You have one really really good year at a mid-major. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense for you to get your payday and
Right.
be a power conference level coach. And I wish some players and coaches would be a little more loyal. I know there's still coaches out there. I mean, like one that comes to mind, Randy Bennett. He's one of the best coaches in the country at St. Mary's. He's never jumped ship from that program. So credit to him for what he's done. He's pretty stubborn in the portal. He told Aiden Mahaney that he has to come back in redshirt. He would have to sit out a year if he was going to go back. So Mahaney went elsewhere. But yeah, he's not. I don't think he's really a fan of the NIL era. But
Yeah.
I do credit him for being as loyal as he's been to St. Mary's throughout the years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for today. As I said, we could keep going on and on and on forever. But we'll break this down even more for you guys. This gives you kind of a sneak peek in some of the bigger moves that went on in the portal, but there's still plenty of big moves we didn't even get a chance to discuss. So look out for more content as we keep rolling that out. and we'll talk to you next time.